Okay, in the previous video we installed Eclipse and the JDK, the Java JDK, and we got as far as creating this this sort of blank workspace. Brought this up. Now what actually happens behind the scenes, if we look at this location here, I created the workspace in a folder called demo. And right now with this blank workspace, you don't see anything except this .metadata. Metadata, sort of keep track of all the information when you start adding code and compiling stuff and so forth. If you blow away this, then it sort of blows away all the settings that you create. So it's important that this is kept in this directory. Now, what I'm going to do, let's go back here. In this temporary 20 folder, I've stored the source file for the Mandelbrot. And what we need to do is I'm going to create, the first step is we've got this workspace. Next level underneath the workspace is going to be a project. And I'm going to create a Java project. And then under there, I'm going to create a package. So a lot of times when you have complex projects, it's good to order those under what's called packages. And typically the package starts with the name of the company and maybe some other acronyms or whatever. In this particular case, he started with edu, saying this came from some educational institution, HWS, EC, and UMB, whatever that means. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create a package that has this name in it, and then I'm going to import all of these from this level. And this Mandelbrot was pulled down from that website that I showed you on the Mandelbrot. Okay, so let's go back to here. And so now we've got this kind of blank workspace. And to start this, let's go back to here. There's a couple things we're going to have to do. This program is fairly old as far as the Mandelbrot, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it under version of the JDK, the Java 8 instead of the 14. Now if you go to what I did here is Windows Preferences, and then under Java Install JREs, all we have right now is the JDK 14. You can actually have previous versions of the JDK if you need to sort of compile, run legacy stuff, and that's what we're going to do. So I've got those two things on my machine. I've installed both versions at the root level of my D drive. So if you come in here, you can see that I've got the 1.8, it's really the second number, it's version 8, and then this is version 14. So I'm going to point to this in this configuration so that I can actually compile and run the Mandelbrot project with 8. So to do that, I go to the install JREs, hit the add, and say standard VM. Click on the directory so we can find where the home is. I navigate where I have this, which is in the JDK 1.8, and just at this level select the folder. It finds all the jars, hit finish, and then I set this and apply. So now this will be used instead of the 14 when I start creating these projects. If I didn't do this step, it'll actually create a newer version, and so there will be some incompatibilities with the this other Java code. So I'm going to close that out. So the very first thing here, so remember I start with the workspace itself. You can have multiple projects within the workspace, and then each workspace you can have multiple packages. And then under the packages you have the Java code. So several ways of getting at this. I could say create a new Java project here. I could pull down here and do Java project. Comes up with this, and I'll just call this project Mandel. Mandelbrot. And it's going to be using this execution JR, here. That's one way you can choose it. Another way you can choose it through here, because those two versions are here, so you can do it either way. And then I hit next, and I'll leave the defaults here. And so now I've got this kind of folder here, which represents a project. Plus it has all the necessary runtime library pieces for the JDK 8. And then it created an empty source file. Now it's here that I am going to create the import all those Java files. Now, one thing to remember, I'm going to create a package next, and I'm going to use, otherwise I'll get compile errors. I'm going to use the same basic structure. Oops. I'm going to use the same structure that this program uses in Mandelbrot, which is going to be, if you drill into it, it's going to be edu, and the way it's done when you do these directories, it's sort of edu.hws.eck.umb. So it's at that point that I'm going to import that into the project. But first I need to create the project. So I need this string here, and that will be my project, my package name. So I'll grab that. I'll do a right click on source, new package, and the name of the package is going to be this string right in here. So it basically has that hierarchy. Do a finish, and so now you got this little package guy. Now from here, I'll right click and do an import, and you pick general and then file system. Go to next. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pull those source files from the directory that's under the UMB. So if we were drilling down here, we go to where the Mandelbrot is, go to temp, Mandelbrot, and drill all the way down to the lowest part here, which is the UMB. This folder here, that's what we're going to select. It finds all the Java files for that. You select all and then hit finish. Now what's cool about this is we get no errors. No, what I've got is under this project menu, I typically have this build automatically. So what happens is anytime I bring in, add new Java files or make any changes, it will automatically compile when I do a save for that file. You don't have to have that. You can do it manually, but for such a small program like this, I have it automatically. Now these tabs down here will give you various information, and the important thing down here is to make sure that you don't have any compile errors. Now there is 34 warnings. They're usually not lethal, and you can usually run the program. Typically you want all the warnings, all the errors out. There is no errors here, so that's really cool. It's using version 8 here of the Java JDK. Now we're ready to almost run the program and see how it works from Eclipse. Now to do that, Java has a main file. So the older versions, in older versions of Java, they had this notion of applets. And this has been sort of deprecated in most browsers. They don't use applets anymore for security. And he wrote an applet version of kicking this thing off. We're not really interested in this anymore. But fortunately, he created an alternative to that, which is to create a Java application. So this would be something in the old days if you wanted to create an applet that you can embed into as a component into a web browser, but there's other ways they do that now. So instead, you look for the main Java program. If you double click on this, it creates these tabs for your source. So the quickest way to run this is to create a run configuration. The run configuration is something that it creates automatically if you use this menu, but sometimes you'll have to go in and manually change the run configuration. And you'll see that when I get to the Java FX video. So now let's run this. You've got to be in, you've got to click on this main Java file, do a right click, and you might not see this in the video, but there is a, you could probably do it from here, up in this menu, say run as, and see it's this Java application. Now this will pop this up, and voila, we got our great, beautiful Mandelbrot. Totally compiled, no errors, and it's running. So it's just going to go briefly. This little app is kind of cool. It's got some various menu items, and it's got examples with some little images, and you can click on this and it'll actually create some of the different Mandelbrots. This one is particularly beautiful, as you can see, and you can do things like have it so you can actually drag the image around and so forth. So without too much hullabaloo, if you know the right steps and using the right version, we're able to compile this. Now let's say we wanted to, this is running it out of Eclipse, but normally you don't want to do that. You want to give a jar to somebody or run it through the jar. So I'll show you briefly how to export this program to a jar file, and it'll be actually a clickable jar file. So come down to here. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a jar file which will contain the bytecode for all of this. So these Java files give you all the human readable part of it. What happens when you compile it, it'll create these .class files, and it's really the .class files that gets executed. And the jar file, what it does is it sort of compresses all those files, puts it into a nice one file executable. To do that is you can go up to here at the top level of the project and say export, and this time I'll go to Java and I'll choose runnable jar file. You'll have to pick a configuration. Since we did create that as a Java application, this thing was created for it, so that's the configuration. And then we'll use the defaults, but I'm going to browse to my little temporary directory that's in temp2, and I'm going to just call it demo.jar, and then finish. Because it has warnings, it gives you this thing, but I'm not too worried about that right now. Now, if we go back to my directory, we should have a demo.jar file here, and if I double click on it, it pops the application. So now you got a nice executable application. This is pretty neat. It's got some let's see, it's got some controls. It shows a palette editor. You can make adjustments and so forth. So this is fairly, it's a older version because it's using Swing. So if you look at some of these imports, the imports are sort of imports from different libraries, and you'll see that some of the let's see if we can find something like menus. It's using Swing, as you can see here, in AWT. So the earliest GUI for graphics for Java was AWT, and it would use Swing. However, the newest kid on the block is called Java FX, and they say eventually it will replace the swing. There's another graphics toolkit called SWT, and it corresponds to. So there's an SWT that corresponds to AWT, and there's a JFace that corresponds to swing. I think both of these libraries are going to be taken over by the Java FX. And so in the next video, well, in one of the videos that I'm going to do, it's going to describe how to get a Java FX environment. So let's see, anything else I need to say? Only thing I can say here is when I imported it in, it sort of automatically created these other sub packages. So you've got, each one of these is considered a package, and it brought it in, and it brought everything in the way it should be in the right directories. Can't think of anything else right now. I think the next step, the next video will be create just a very simple JavaFX using the version 14 instead of 8. And that's a little tricky on the configuration because you actually have to go through several steps. You'll actually have to use the Eclipse marketplace to bring in some components. You'll have to actually go to the JavaFX site, download some jar files, and then you'll have to figure out how to create libraries and put it onto the system on this in this project. I'll link it to the project. So okay, so I think that's it for this particular video.